John Fetterman, the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, checked into hospital on Wednesday to receive treatment for clinical depression, his chief of staff said. The news came a week after the Democrat, who suffered a stroke while campaigning last year, was hospitalized after feeling lightheaded. Fetterman is a rising star among Democrats. In a statement on Thursday, Fetterman's chief of staff, Adam Jenelson, said, "While John has experienced depression off and on throughout his life, it only became severe in recent weeks." Last November, the 53-year-old former mayor of Braddock and state lieutenant governor flipped a Republican-held Senate seat, defeating the Trump-endorsed celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz to give his party control of the chamber by 51 seats to 49. Fetterman suffered a serious stroke during the campaign, prompting Republicans to claim he was not fit to take office. In his victory speech, Fetterman referred to the stroke when he said he campaigned for anyone that ever got knocked down that got back up. On Thursday, Fetterman's wife, Giselle, said she was proud of Fetterman for asking for help and getting the care he needs. "After what he's been through in the past year, there's probably no one who wanted to talk about his own health less than John," she wrote on Twitter. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York said Fetterman is getting the help he needs and is expected to return soon. "The Democratic caucus is totally behind him," Schumer said. Last Wednesday, Fetterman was taken to a hospital in Washington, D.C. after feeling lightheaded at a Democratic event. He was released last Friday. A spokesperson said then, in addition to the CT, CTA, and MRI tests ruling out a stroke, his EEG test results came back normal, with no evidence of seizures. John is looking forward to spending some time with his family and returning to the Senate on Monday. In his statement on Thursday, Jenelson said, "On Monday, John was evaluated by Dr. Brian P. Monahan, the attending physician of the United States Congress. Yesterday, Dr. Monahan recommended inpatient care at Walter Reed in Bethesda, Maryland. John agreed, and he is receiving treatment on a voluntary basis. After examining John, the doctors at Walter Reed told us John is getting the care he needs, and will soon be back to himself." Among well-wishers, the former Obama advisor Tommy Vietor said Fetterman was incredibly brave to talk about his mental health challenges publicly, especially knowing that people will try to exploit it for political purposes. But his decision to come forward will undoubtedly help encourage others to seek help.
Strike at German airport's grounds, nearly 300,000 passengers. The strike coincided with the start of the Munich Security Conference, with more than 40 heads of state and 60 ministers expected to attend. In an early sign of the disruption, Romania's foreign minister, unable to board a cancelled flight, will be forced to fly to Austria and then make the more than 4-hour drive to Munich, a Romanian embassy official said. It is the latest in a series of strikes and protests that have hit major European economies, including France, Britain and Spain, as higher food and energy prices knocked incomes and living standards following the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Around 295,000 passengers are affected by the cancellation of some 2,340 flights at Bremen, Dortmund, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Hanover, Munich and Stuttgart airports, according to the ADV Airports Association. "We really haven't had such an escalation through strike action," ADV's Ralph Beisel told broadcaster Bayerischer Rundfunk. "When we look at the airport terminals this morning, it reminds us more of the worst days of the coronavirus and less of a warning strike." German trade union Verdi announced the strike on Wednesday after it said collective bargaining efforts for ground service staff, public sector officials and aviation security workers had made little progress. The union has pressed for a 10.5% wage increase, or at least €500 a month. If nothing is done about pay now, We will all be in for another chaotic summer, Verdi Deputy Chair Christine Behel told Inforadio on Friday. It's about sending a really strong signal. Among the airlines affected, Lufthansa said it had been forced to cancel more than 1,300 flights and suspend operations at the hub airports Frankfurt and Munich on Friday. The carrier declined to give an estimate of the cost of the strike but has on previous occasions said such action costs it 10 to 15 million euros a day. The head of Verdi, Frank Wernicke, told the Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung newspaper that strike action could expand to hospitals and garbage collection.
A recount could mean Japan has 7,000 more islands. Japan conducted a recount of its number of islands amid criticism that the figures weren't correct. Geographers are expected to add more than 7,000 islands to the count. Japan conducted a recount of its number of islands amid criticism that the figures weren't correct. Geographers are expected to add more than 7,000 islands to the count. The number of islands in Japan is expected to more than double after 7,000 new islands it didn't know existed were discovered. The nation currently comprises 6,852 islands, but that figure dates back to a 1987 study conducted by the Japan Coast Guard. During a December 2021 parliamentary session, a lawmaker argued the data was old and the true figure could be vastly different. An accurate understanding of the number of islands is an important administrative matter that is related to the national interest, the legislator said, according to Kyodo News. During the 1987 study, officials listed, by hand, islands with a circumference of at least 100 meters. They used basic technology that often misidentified groups of small islands as one island. They also left out thousands of islands, many of which were within lakes or rivers. They didn't include river sandbanks either, which the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea now recognizes as islands. Plus, volcanic activity has led to the creation of more islands since the study over 35 years ago. Now, with the recount, that figure is expected to rise to 14,125 islands, a source familiar with the matter told Kyodo News. The news is part of a report that the Geospatial Information Authority of Japan is expected to release next month. For the recount, geographers used advanced mapping technology and cross-referenced with past aerial photos. Like the original study, they didn't include anything with a circumference of less than 100 meters. The final figure could still change slightly because geographers are still making final adjustments. Despite the huge increase, the discovery is unlikely to change the size of Japan's territory or its waters, Kyodo News reported.
EDF. French energy giant posts worst-ever results. Energy prices may have jumped to unprecedented highs, but for France's state-controlled power company EDF 2022 was a miserable year with record annual losses of 17.9 billion euros. A price cap on energy for French consumers hit EDF profits hard, but so did the enforced closure of many of its nuclear power stations for repairs. The losses are the third biggest in French corporate history and the worst for more than 20 years. EDF's debts have spiraled to 64.5 billion euros. The losses are in marked contrast to EDF's UK-based business, which made an underlying profit of £1.12 billion supplying electricity and gas to 5 million households. In France, President Emmanuel Macron's government responded to Russia's invasion of Ukraine by imposing a tariff shield for consumers, limiting energy companies to a 4% rise in 2022 followed by 15% in 2023, keeping inflation lower than in other European countries. but it meant that EDF had to sell power to French consumers at a loss, while UK consumers paid far more for their energy. EDF has around 80% of France's electricity market. French industry has not seen such poor results since 2002, when Vivendi Universal and France Telecom both posted losses above €20 billion for the previous year. EDF has never before reported such large losses. The 2022 results were significantly affected by the decline in our electricity output, and also by exceptional regulatory measures introduced in France in difficult market conditions, said Chief Executive Luc Rémont, who said EDF's priority was now to put the company back on track. He said core earnings would be significantly higher in 2023. EDF's nuclear output in France fell by 30% to its lowest since 1988, as more than half of its 56 aging nuclear power stations went offline for repairs, which had been delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. France has the biggest fleet of nuclear plants in Europe. The outages meant that France became a net importer of electricity for the first time in decades. EDF's financial woes have various causes, but another major factor is an obligation it has to sell a quarter of its production at a fixed price to its competitors. It meant the French electricity market was able to open up to competition. But EDF says it has forced the company into the absurd situation of subsidizing its competitors. In 2022, things became surreal, in the words of one former CEO. And many of these competitors, EDF argues, aren't real players at all, but simply market traders. 3 former CEOs have described the system as a poison pill and have blamed the EU and Germany for rigging the system against France's interests. Although the French state already controls 84% of EDF, the government has begun a process to fully nationalize the company. Major changes are likely, not least to Iran. President Macron has spoken of a renaissance in the nuclear industry, with plans for 6 new reactors to help France reach carbon neutrality by 2050, in line with EU aims.